said about spontaneous inspirations and serendipity in art, but did you ever consciously expose yourself to new elements just to acquire new perspectives and motifs?
Yes, yes. I've been, as I said, I've been a watercolorist for almost my entire artistic career, and about 5 years ago, I focused entirely on oil painting, much to people's chagrin. People said, "Oh no, you're not an oil painter," you know, blah blah blah. But it was really wonderful for me because it was like going back to zero. I knew really nothing about oil painting, and it was the challenge and the struggle. And now when I'm sort of back to watercolor painting, I really look at my watercolor painting differently because of what the torture I went through with oil painting. You know, it's like, why does it take so damn long to dry? All those things, you know. And why isn't it transparent unless I make it transparent? Those kinds of things. So yeah, I think anything you can involve in, and I mentioned model making. I love to build models, and sometimes I think of what I do in art as two-dimensional model building. And I would have been very happy to be a model maker, and you know, I love to build things from scratch. When I say model building, I don't mean go to the store and buy a plastic airplane. I mean really make it from nothing. You know, with whatever materials you have, or go get some materials. It's just you know, it's the process. Like I said earlier about my favorite painting is the one I'm working on. It's the process that's so electrifying, and it's the challenge. And you know, how can I make that work? How can I really build an Italian doorway? And can I duplicate that? Can I make it like a real doorway? So it's any extraneous exercise that you do is incredibly important when it comes back to what you do, let's say, as your main focus. You know, that's sort of what astronomy does for me. I love to look at things through the telescope in real time rather than a picture in a book, because there's some essence that's transferred, some, I dare not even use the word spirit, but there's a spiritual element about being there, about really experiencing, really seeing Saturn's rings through the telescope is something you can never get from a television or a book. There's something that's sort of firsthand about it. So all of those experiences go into what you do. That's why I said it was so important to be out when the wind's blowing or when it's really cold and your fingers are numb, and that all goes into your work. Yes? I have a small art collection. Yes, I do, and I wish I had more. It's really a dollars and cents sort of thing, but I do have a small collection. No one of note, unfortunately, but and I have some of my children's art, which is very valuable to me. Some things I was very inspired by them because you know this whole thing, like Picasso said that every child is an artist. The problem is keeping them a child. But the things that my children would do were just amazing because they were so free and uninhibited, and no one had sort of tweaked them this way or that way. So I have a number of my children's pieces of artwork. My daughter's still here, be careful. Yes. A significant piece. I guess some of the real classical pieces, like the Dutch masters, which I've always admired, like Johann Vermeer, who I thought was just amazing what he did in his compositions. Those are sort of iconic things. But I guess I've always had a thing about American art. So but I'm not answering your question. I'm very sorry. I'm failing. I can't think of any one piece of art that was like, oh well, that's it. But certainly I was always drawn to painting, and I have done some sculpture, but I've always been a two-dimensional sort of artist. But I've also always had a passion for representational or realist art. Yes. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. Did I have any hardships being a painter? No, I was very fortunate from the beginning. Actually, I'll tell you the story how I became a professional artist. After I got out of high school, I worked a number of odd jobs in factories. I worked for a mason contractor. That's why my arms are so long from carrying cement blocks. And I worked in well, anyway, I had this project I was working on, which was building a sailboat. And I needed some extra money. So I did painting because I love to do it. So I noticed that a gentleman had some paintings in a local bank where I had a checking account. So I went in and I asked the manager, I said, well, I have some paintings. When this show is done, could I hang them and have them for sale? And he said, well, okay. Long story short, a woman from Washington, and I should say this is in my hometown of Syracuse, New York. A woman who lived in Washington who was from Syracuse, her brother picked her up from the airport. They stopped at the bank to cash a check, and she saw the paintings and she bought all of them. And I said, hey, wait a minute. This is really cool. So, you know, and my dad, bless his heart, he was a very blue collar kind of a punch a time clock in a factory. He didn't think that could ever work. But I decided that at that moment, speaking of a pivotal point, I decided at that moment that it was a realistic endeavor. So, you know, that's it. Again, I didn't put my paintings in there because I wanted to be a professional artist. But that did sort of open the floodgates. So that was I would assume that's a pivotal moment. I said, aha, let's go. So that's when I went for it. And I said, I'm going to try this. But I had good fortune. People liked what I did, and I have to say, I had many people that helped me, that encouraged me, that offered to have shows, that put me in contact with people that were with galleries. And again, once you, like I said earlier, once you establish a little bit of a snowball, the snowball gets bigger. And one thing does lead to the next, believe it or not, even though you might have some frustration. Again, that's how it happened for me.
Greg, we have a question in the back.
Okay. Thank you, Veronica.
How often do you get back to Maine, and what's your favorite place to paint in Maine?
I will be back in a week from today. I'll be back in Port Clyde at our home there, and usually by this time I'm in Maine, but I had a speaking engagement, which I'm very happy to be here again. So I'll be back there very soon. And I'm sorry, what was the second part? Where in Maine? Oh, well, we live in Port Clyde, Maine, which is sort of what they call mid-coast Maine. And it's on a little peninsula, and we see the Atlantic Ocean on one side and Port Clyde Harbor on the other part. I don't wander far from that point. We do go out we have a boat, and we go out to the islands, which are amazing because most of the islands of Maine have nothing on them other than what has been there for thousands of years. There's no man-made objects, so that's kind of a different feeling. Something does happen to you in Maine that's this. You feel like you're further away from what I call the machine. Oh, oh, Bangor, yes. Well, I don't have to tell you anything about Maine. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world, without question, except for the mosquitoes. The mosquitoes are relentless. But even with the mosquitoes, it's totally worth it. Yeah. So soon we'll be back in Maine. Yes.
As many young artists do, did you try any physical self-expression?
I don't understand the question.
Like,
physical self-expression.
yeah, like I see so many young artists changing their hair, getting
Oh,
tattoos,
okay.
piercing their body.
Yeah.
Things that you would consider alternative.
I guess one of the disappointments for people that like my artwork is that I'm sort of, you know, uninteresting and kind of boring. I don't have any of that stuff. And I'm not saying that I never focused on that, but no, I didn't. I never grew a beard or anything like that, or I, you know, wore a cape or. No, I mean those. I mean, no, it's true, and that's the boring part of it. I mean, someone like Salvador Dali, you know, he had the great mustache, and those are all great things. No, I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying I never did it. And maybe I would be further along if I had been more outrageous. I think it's a legitimate question. But you know, you've seen me now for like an hour, and I'm kind of just a regular guy, you know, it's nothing. Yes. I'm sorry, I
I'm coming,
can't hear you.
sorry.
How do I respond to criticism? Not very well. And the interview that I had with the famous artist when I first went up to Maine, I just left there and I was just like totally hating the guy because he said, "Now why would you do that and prevent the viewer from entering your picture?" And I was like, "Oh." And he really did tear the pieces apart. And I was pretty proud of what I had done. And he really ripped them apart. So years later, I realized that everything he said, of course, was correct. And I wrote him a letter and I said, "John, I have to confess to you that, you know, many years have gone by, but I really appreciate what you did for me." Because he could have just been very glazing and said, "Well, this is very nice," but he really tried to instruct me. He was a longtime professor at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, so he really knew what he was talking about. And but of course, we all have an ego, and it was a pretty big blow, you know, for someone. I was probably 24, 25. But in the end, it was, you know, it's one of my fondest memories, obviously. I'm talking about it years and years later. Any other great questions? Yes. Making reproductions of work. It has helped some. You know, it used to be a more exotic thing, but now the availability of different processes makes it a more doable thing, which means that in harsh terms, that the market is more flooded with prints. Everybody can afford to do prints. So I do some. They're what I've learned is to do them in a very limited fashion, really high quality pieces. I might do 10 or 20. That would be the max. You know, when someone says, "Well, I have a limited edition of 64,000 prints," that doesn't. Number one, that doesn't seem very limited. Number two, who the hell would want to sign 64,000 prints? I mean, that's like, how long would that take? It's called giclée, which is, you know, you understand what that is, yeah. Yes. Absolutely, that's what I said. That goes on your vitae. That you know, and that's how it starts. And then the list gets bigger, and you know, you just don't know where it's going to lead. But persistence, I guess, is the. And we're all fans of. Well, most of us are fans of Harry Potter and, you know, J.K. Rowling and her great story of early disappointment and, you know, living in poverty. But she never said die. You know, I mean, she just kept pushing it and look what's happened to her. You know, she could have said, "Well, nobody likes it, forget it," but she kept trying and trying and trying. And this is a very common story. So, but that takes fortitude, you know, and it's often challenging. I was very lucky that people liked my work and they bought it, and I've been able to make a living at it. I mean, what more could anyone ask for, really? You know, as in terms of an artist, more fame. But I think that's another personality thing. I mean, sometimes people in a given area or where I am, they will say, "Well, are you the artist?" You know, blah blah blah, and it's really fun the first few times, but then it gets to be a little bit of I can't imagine how Brad Pitt does it. You know, I mean, no wonder they wear the glasses. You know, and they're kind of like. Because it's just, after a while, it's just, "Would you please leave me alone?" So I don't think I'd want to be that kind of famous. I'd rather have my work known and not me be known so much, I think. Yes, was there one more question? Yes. Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And thank you all. And again, thank you to the Congresswoman.